Around 5,000 years ago, in the baking heat of Mesopotamia, a temple accountant pressed a reed into a slab of wet clay. And without realizing it, he was helping invent the most powerful technology in human history. He wasn't a philosopher. He wasn't a king. He was, essentially, a warehouse clerk. His job was painfully boring. Keep track of who delivered how much barley to the temple, and who was owed how much beer in return. That's it. Grain in, beer out. And to stop people from arguing about it, he scratched little symbols into clay, a jar for beer, a stalk for barley, a few strokes for the amount. Nobody in that room was trying to invent money. They were trying to stop their neighbors from lying about barley. And yet those boring little clay records, glorified IOUs for beer, sit at the root of everything that followed. Every coin, every banknote, every credit card, every number glowing on a banking app right now traces back, step by step, to people solving one small, annoying, practical problem at a time. Nobody ever sat down and designed money. It accumulated. Over 5,000 years, across 4 continents, through the hands of farmers, priests, kings, forgers, and goldsmiths, each one adding a piece without ever seeing the whole. So how did humans get from beer IOUs pressed into mud to the invisible numbers that now run the entire planet? The answer takes us through cowrie shells carried across oceans, a small kingdom that stamped the first coins, Chinese merchants who got tired of carrying their own wealth, Mongol emperors who forced an entire empire to accept paper, and one night in 1971, when money quietly stopped being real at all. Before we start, if you enjoy stories like this, hit subscribe. It genuinely helps a small channel like this keep making them. Alright, let's begin where every good invention story begins, with a problem. To understand why money exists at all, you have to understand just how break-in the alternative was, because for most of human history, the alternative was barter. And barter has a fatal flaw hiding inside it. One so fundamental that economists gave it a name: the double coincidence of wants. Here's what that means in the simplest possible terms. Say you're a fisherman and you need shoes. Under barter, you can't just buy shoes. You have to find a shoemaker who at that exact moment happens to want fish. If the shoemaker wants grain instead, you're stuck. Now you have to find a farmer who wants fish, trade for grain, and carry that grain back to the shoemaker, hoping he hasn't changed his mind and hoping your fish haven't rotted in the meantime. Every single transaction required 2 people whose desires happened to line up perfectly at the same time in the same place. It was like trying to run an economy on coincidences. Small villages could get around this with something simpler: memory. Everyone knew everyone, so people just kept mental tabs. I help you build your hut today, you give me meat after the next hunt. Anthropologists who study these societies say this is actually what came first, not barter between strangers, but favors and debts between neighbors. Money's true ancestor isn't the swap, it's the IOU. And that works beautifully right up until the group gets too big. Once you're trading with people you'll never see again, memory fails, trust fails, and humans needed something that could carry trust between strangers. Something physical. Something you could hold. The first solutions were, by modern standards, deeply strange. Cattle, sacks of grain, blocks of salt, which, by the way, is where the word salary comes from, Roman connections to salt payments, whale teeth in Fiji, and most successful of all, the cowrie shell, a small, shiny, porcelain-like shell scooped mostly from the waters around the Maldives, which somehow became money across Africa, China, and South Asia, and stayed in use in some regions into the 1800s. That makes the humble cowrie arguably the longest-serving currency in human history, outlasting empires, outlasting gold coins, outlasting entire civilizations. And it worked, because good money only really needs a few properties. It has to be durable. Cattle die, fish rot, cowries last centuries. It has to be portable. You can carry 1,000 shells, you cannot carry 1,000 cows. It has to be divisible. You can't make change with a live goat. And it has to be scarce, hard enough to get that nobody can just make more of it. Almost everything that happens for the next 5,000 years is just humanity slowly optimizing those 4 properties, one upgrade at a time. Metal was the obvious next step. Copper, bronze, silver, durable, divisible, rare. By around 4,000 years ago, Mesopotamian traders were paying in silver by weight, measured in a unit called the shekel, a word that survives right now as the currency of modern Israel. But metal by weight had its own maddening flaw. Every single transaction required a scale. You had to weigh the silver, check its purity, argue about the scale itself. Buying bread became a chemistry exam. And it's exactly that annoyance that triggers the next leap. That leap happened in a small, wildly wealthy kingdom called Lydia, in what is now Western Turkey, sometime in the 7th century BC. Lydia had a river that washed down grains of electrum, a natural mix of gold and silver, and at some point, someone in Lydia had an idea so simple, it's almost embarrassing. What if we weigh the metal once, melt it into a standard lump, and stamp the king's mark on it as a guarantee? That's it. That's the coin. A blob of metal with a promise pressed into its face. The stamp, often a roaring lion, the symbol of the Lydian kings, did something no shell or ingot had ever done. It moved trust from the metal to the mark. You no longer had to weigh anything or test anything. You just had to recognize the lion. The king's reputation did the work. And this is worth pausing on, because it's the real invention hiding inside the coin. Money stopped being valuable stuff and started being a guarantee from an authority. Every currency since, every one, is built on that same trick. Lydia's coins made its final king, Croesus, so absurdly wealthy that people still say, rich as Croesus, 2,500 years later, and the idea spread like fire. The Greek city-states each stamped their own coins, Athens with its owl, which became something like the dollar of the ancient Mediterranean. Rome scaled it into the denarius, minted in a temple of the goddess Juno Moneta, and it's from moneta that we get the words mint and money. Coins turned out to be more than convenient. They were how empires paid soldiers, collected taxes, and stitched millions of strangers into a single economy. For over 1,000 years, the coin ruled everything. But coins have a flaw too, and it's the most literal flaw imaginable. They're heavy. Nowhere did that weight hurt more than in China. Chinese coins were bronze, low in value, cast with a square hole in the middle so they could be strung together in strings of 1,000. A serious purchase meant hauling strings of coins that could weigh as much as a person. Merchants in the booming Tang dynasty, moving fortunes across hundreds of miles of road, were essentially professional weightlifters with a robbery problem. So around the 9th century, they found a workaround. A merchant would deposit his mountain of coins with a trusted agent and receive a paper receipt. Carry the paper, redeem the coins at the other end. They called it fake yen, literally flying money, because it let value fly across the empire while the actual metal sat still. Sound familiar? It's the beer IOU from Mesopotamia all over again, just with better paper. Humanity had come full circle, from written promises to objects, and now back to written promises. Then came the step nobody had dared before. By the Song dynasty, around the year 1000, merchants in Sichuan were issuing standardized paper notes, jiaozi, and the government soon took over, printing the world's first true state paper money. And when the Mongols conquered China and Kublai Khan took the throne, he pushed the idea to its logical extreme. Paper money that wasn't even redeemable for metal, that everyone in the empire was required to accept because the Khan said so, and refusing carried penalties you did not want to explore. When the Venetian traveler Marco Polo saw this system in the 1270s, he was so stunned he devoted an entire chapter to it, marveling that the great Khan had essentially discovered alchemy, turning paper into gold. Europeans back home read his account and simply did not believe him. And notice what had just happened, because it's the quiet climax of this entire story. For the first time, money's value came from nothing but decree and shared belief. Not gold, not silver, not shells, pure trust enforced at scale. China had accidentally run the experiment the whole modern world now lives inside. 600 years early, it even ran the failure ahead of schedule. Successive dynasties couldn't resist printing more and more of it. The notes collapsed into worthlessness, and by the 1400s, China actually abandoned paper money entirely and went back to silver and cowries. The future had arrived, burned itself down, and retreated, waiting for someone else to rediscover it. That someone was Europe, which got there not through emperors, but through goldsmiths. In 17th century London, people with gold needed somewhere safe to keep it, and goldsmiths had the best vaults in town. Deposit your gold, get a paper receipt. Soon people realized it was far easier to hand over the receipt than to withdraw the gold, walk it across London, and have someone else deposit it right back. The receipts started circulating as money, exactly like flying money, independently reinvented. Then the goldsmiths noticed something that would change civilization. Almost nobody ever came back for their gold at the same time, which meant a goldsmith could issue more receipts than he had gold in the vault, lending the extras out and charging interest. Money was now being created out of thin air, backed by nothing but the statistical confidence that not everyone panics at once. That single, slightly scandalous realization is the seed of fractional reserve banking, the mechanism that still creates most of the money in existence today. In 1694, the Bank of England formalized the whole game at national scale, and its notes evolved into the banknotes we know, each one still carrying, in Britain, the ghost of the goldsmith's receipt in its fine print. I promise to pay the bearer on demand. For the next 2.5 centuries, the world ran on a compromise. Paper in your hand, gold in a vault somewhere, a promise connecting the two. And then, on a Sunday night in August 1971, the promise ended. President Richard Nixon announced in a televised address that the United States would suspend the dollar's convertibility into gold. It was framed as temporary. It never came back. And because the world's currencies were anchored to the dollar, that one announcement quietly cut every currency on Earth loose from anything physical. Kublai Khan's experiment, money by pure decree, was now the operating system of the entire planet. Most people watching TV that night had no idea anything important had happened. Today, the story has reached its logical endpoint. Roughly 90% of the world's money doesn't exist physically at all. No paper, no metal, no shells. Just entries in databases, the temple clerk's clay tablet running at the speed of light. Looking back across this entire arc, from beer IOUs in Mesopotamia, to lion-stamped lumps in Lydia, to flying money in China, to a promise canceled on live television, the story of money is really a story about trust changing costumes. First we trusted things, shells, salt, silver. Then we trusted marks, the king's lion, the emperor's seal. Then we trusted institutions, goldsmiths, banks, governments. Each step solved a real, practical, annoying problem the previous step had created. Too heavy, too slow, too easy to fake. And each step required believing in something slightly less physical than before. Nobody designed this. No genius woke up with money fully formed in their head. A clerk wanted fewer arguments about barley. A king wanted taxes he didn't have to weigh. A merchant wanted to stop carrying 70 pounds of bronze. A goldsmith noticed his customers never all showed up at once. Thousands of small, selfish, practical decisions accumulated across 5,000 years and every inhabited continent, until they added up to the strangest technology humans have ever built. A shared belief so strong that it feeds cities, moves armies, and shapes nearly every hour of your life. The paper in your pocket is worth something for exactly one reason, because everyone agrees it is. And tomorrow morning, 8 billion people will wake up and quietly agree all over again. If this story surprised you, you'll like what's coming next. Subscribe so you don't miss it, and tell me in the comments, what should Talk dig into next?